Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Emily Scott. I'm a neighborhood planner here at the Tulsa Planning Office and one of the conference organizers. I'm very excited for this next focus session. We're going to dive in on a different unique population in our cities. We're going to focus in on a critical component of public infrastructure, our schools, our school districts, and youth. So today we're going to learn about a program titled Y Plan from the University of California at Berkeley's Center for Cities and Schools. The program has engaged over 10,000 students on projects focused on improving public transportation, access to green space, public art and civic space, healthy eating and active living, and more, all across the country. This session today is presented by TSET. Our speaker this afternoon is Deborah McCoy, the Executive Director and founder of UC Berkeley's Center for Cities and Schools at the Institute of Urban and Regional Development. Deborah is also a lecturer in the Department of City and Regional Planning and at the Graduate School of Education at UC Berkeley.
I just want to first say hello to everybody. I'm joining you from Berkeley, California. And it's graduation day in city planning. So I've been going back and forth between the awesome presentations here in Tulsa and the Berkeley graduation speeches. So it's been really great to hear. Particularly, I was able to zoom in early at 7 a.m. and early around the keynote and the opening framing, which I really appreciated. I felt that I just want to say that the keynote opening around experiential equity really serves as a great lens to begin a conversation about engaging young people in transportation planning. And much of my presentation, I'm gonna, well, let me try to get into my slides here. So hold on, and then I'll tell you more about how I'm gonna loop back to some of the presentation today. So in trying to build on many of the conversations that I was grateful to be able to kind of go in and out of a little bit today, there are three things I'd like to do in the next 20 minutes. And then I would really like everybody have as much of a Zoom-led conversation as we can, particularly picking up on so many of the interesting threads that were discussed today, locally in Tulsa as well as nationally. So first, I want to provide a brief background to our understanding of the power and promise of engaging young people in transportation planning. While I'm focusing on transportation planning, the methodology in our work clearly, as you mentioned, goes over all different sectors of the built environment and planning in our cities in general. Housing, in my background in particular, is in housing and public space, and schools as well. So a little bit of focus on transportation, but it certainly is reflective of all sectors and elements in our cities. I will provide one strategy that is now 2 decades in the making, called Y Plan, and it's a civic learning methodology that will be a way of showing you what's possible with young people and hopefully inspiring you to go to our website, use some of the publicly available tools, and begin to engage young people in these critical conversations. So the Center for Cities and Schools at UC Berkeley is an action research center. We've got lots of acronyms, in this work. It's between the Graduate School of Education and the Department of City Planning, located or hosted at the Institute of Urban and Regional Development. But we're pretty grounded, and I teach in both departments, particularly in the Department of City Planning. Our mission is just like what you're doing today, is to have critical conversations where we promote high quality education and young people in particular as an essential component of urban and metropolitan vitality to create equitable, healthy, sustainable, and joyful communities for all. Just a couple of slides to set a context for our work with transportation and young people. Transportation is integral, as you know, to young people's ability to access key aspects and opportunities in our cities, from education to jobs to fun and all aspects of life. The Center for Cities and Schools has engaged young people in over 50. It's kind of crazy, but when you think back 2 decades, it's 50 transportation related projects. When we go back, and we're actually just have a book coming out on our work, which will be coming out in the fall with Routledge. So we've been doing a lot of reflective analysis about what has our work been in these different sectors and what is emerging most as a common theme or pattern across the different sectors. And within transportation, one of the least understood dynamics with young people in transportation is how youth experience transportation overall, not just the transit or bus or train, but the experience of being at the platform, how they are perceived as, as the problem before they're seen as a user or as a customer, right? They're seen as jumping turnstiles. So youth policy is all around prevention, or really the problems and even the criminalization of young people in public spaces that are around transit, that are very much about the transit experience and transportation experience. Over the years, hundreds of people, of young people, have become advocates for change and agents in the creation of equitable cities by focusing specifically on this transportation sector, not just saying, okay, we're seen as the problem, but no, we have to shift that around and become active as parts of the solution. In doing this, they begin to transform their communities by educating adults who have been working in these issues for a long time. What we talk about a lot is not just that young people educate adults or adults that educate young people, but that we really foster communities of practice, where intergenerational communities of practice, where everybody truly learns from everybody by bringing a sense of humility to these planning conversations, and not a notion of being an expert, but a real shift to the notion of bringing expertise. And that is a subtle shift, but a critical shift in engaging young people in planning. Through their own words and actions, young people advocate for new transportation improvements, technologies, alternatives to equitably linked schools, services, resources, and public spaces. That notion of connectivity is unbelievably important from a physical and a social way of thinking about places and planning. Additionally, young planners emphasize the critical role transportation plays in fostering independence, right? Especially if we're not looking at car dependent places, right? But to how can they be independent as they grow through teens and into young adulthood, as well as community connectivity among all city residents. I was intrigued with what I was able to hear about the older population being engaged. And I actually think there's a lot of connection between young people who are really often raised, particularly the lower income communities, who are often living and working much more closely with older families. So that intergenerational notion, not only to plan together, but how households are thinking about each other, is also a very important part of this work. So now the question is of how, right? How do we actually engage young people? There are lots of amazing strategies out there, and I just love learning more about them. Today, I'm going to share the UC Berkeley strategy that is developed again over 2 decades, called Y Plan, and it's an acronym. We love acronyms in academia. It stands for Youth Plan, Learn, Act Now. And it's a variety of things that's emerged and grown over the years, right? So it's a civic learning strategy, bringing young people in schools into the heart of city planning community change. One area that's important to us versus a lot of other different types of youth engagement strategies is that we are actually embedded within the school day. And there's an equity issue for that, believing you shouldn't be lucky enough to get into an after school program or a cool project, but that really all young people, especially in public schools, should be exposed to the possibility of engagement in our cities and in planning in particular. So it's embedded into K-12. There's lots of school reform strategies that are furthering this possibility. It's a seminar. It started as a seminar that I've taught at UC Berkeley for a number of years. So higher ed plays an increasingly important role as this has evolved across a number of cities, over 36 cities across the country, as well as over 7 nations. This has really grown into a global network of agents of change, where young people are really listening to each other and across city and national and international boundaries. However, one key thing for Y Plan and to share with you today is that it's also a pun. Really invite everybody here and everybody we work with to really ask why. Why are we planning the way we're planning? Why are we planning what we're planning? And what is the role of all stakeholders, particularly young people? These are just a few of the questions that young people have been engaging in over the years. How can my community prepare for climate change? And if we improve the community, and this is something for particularly painful in housing markets like the Bay Area that is skyrocketing and continue to skyrocket, and so much displacement happening. If I improve my community, will I still be able to afford to live in it? How can we feel safer biking and walking to and from school? Why don't our bus stops have benches and provide shelter? Why is there so much violence on our streets? And again, this is a critical question of why are conditions the way they are here at one corner and then so fundamentally different in another part of our city or another part of our neighborhood just 1 or 2 blocks away? And those are many of the questions that young people are invited to engage in, or often at, whether they use these words directly or more informally. These are many of the questions on the minds of young people and in their hearts. With Why Plan, though, it's not only asking why, it's why not. It's engaging young people and coming up with the new solutions that we so need to address these issues in our cities. There are 5 core principles. When we think about it, Why Plan, again, there are a lot of wonderful strategies out there. I'll share just 5 today. Number 1, an authentic civic client. So the case I'm going to share with you today toward the end of my talk is with BART, Bay Area Regional Transit, one of the largest regional transit providers. They were a client for a year with high schools in Oakland, and they posed genuine problems, challenges that they needed answered. So a lot of youth programs are about young people identifying the problem, and that's really important. We believe that young people also need to be put in the position of consultants for change, just as we would adults. So young people serve as consultants to civic clients, not only with questions and problems to solve, but the power and authority to actually use the young people's ideas. They don't have to, of course, if it doesn't work, but they have to have the power. It has to be an authentic question. As I mentioned before, it's classroom and academic based. It's social justice and equity focused. Any project that we have is really a public good. It doesn't just generate a solution for a small set of people. It has to have a public impact. It follows a 5-step methodology. The way I teach city planning and public participation at Berkeley is just how we engage young people, elementary to high school. And it's clearly place-based. It's situated in planning, practice, and policy. Again, we're developing more and more tools and ways to think about this. There are 2 core indicators, what we say is shared quality indicators of engaging young people. First, is it really understanding and exposing young people to professional practices, really that they're dealing with real tools, real questions, and with many of the planners that are on this call today, right? So it's not just a simulation, it's authentic planning practice. But secondly, it has to involve an understanding of their lived experience. The Why Plan work is seen at the intersection where it's equally important to listen and learn and understand the lived experience of young people, as well as the experience of professional practice. And that's the shared understanding that we find is the kind of secret sauce to change. How it works, we have a 5-step methodology that has been adapted. We say it's a double bottom line, not only developing college, career, and community readiness or civic readiness around young people, but also building healthy, equitable, and joyful cities. Clearly, we don't have time to go over all of these steps today, but as you'll see, startup is a real client question, then going to 2, making sense of the city by collecting data, authentic data, interviews, and surveys, going into a charrette process in stage 3, going into action to generate new ideas with the data and with the evidence, then going public, both virtually, as we have been doing all year in very powerful ways with over 700 young people in California, as well as in City Hall and in classrooms. Going public is very important, but it doesn't stop there. Equally as important is reflection. What happens next after that public presentation? I want to now bring in some of the young people. Oops, sorry, hold on. I'm always worried if a video works in this context, but hopefully it will. I'm going to try to make it a large screen. This is a project. We have a number of videos to try to bring young people's experience to the public and to you all today. This is a 5-minute video that was done, a spotlight on Oakland, where young people worked with BART over a year with the African American Male Achievement Program, which became a national model of really addressing the needs of young African American men. And then there are other programs in the district for women and Latinx, but really addressing these issues of marginalized young people. And particularly this connects to their experience of transportation, of placemaking, and their visions for change.
Oakland to me, it's a big enough city to have a big city feel, but small enough where people call it the town. So many different types of neighborhoods are so close to one another. you genuinely could know almost your whole community. It would be an unfortunate brain drain for a city like Oakland if many of its younger residents that are full of potential, full of talent, full of ideas, won't feel there's a place for them in Oakland.
The Y Plan is an educational initiative and methodology, and there's an acronym and it stands for Youth, Plan, Learn, Act Now. It asks the question of why.
Y Plan and BART teamed up to give us some feedback of what BART could do to better connect with not just the community, but young people. The Y Plan students said their home station is the Coliseum station, and they felt it could really use some art. They wanted to show that this station is something that is worth respecting and is worth more than a bad headline, and that really caught our attention.
I thought they were just gonna like ask us like a couple questions and then we weren't really gonna see him at all after that. But then they came to our class and they really worked with us.
What's really central to the Y Plan is that it's integrated into the school day, and it's a tool for teachers to be able to do what they're doing in the classroom so that the community and the context for learning becomes the core text for learning.
I was concerned that it was almost too advanced. However, I'm glad that it was. The curricular aspect of Y Plan, I think, supplemented our curriculum, and we used it as an opportunity to do some community development.
They brought to us their ideas, and it was to the right people. And it actually happened during some of the schooling, through some of the high school curriculum, where they put together a whole presentation with really valid, great ideas of what BART could do to better connect with not just the community, but young people. And what we heard was very inspiring, and that's what made us think, let's bring them on as summer interns and help them implement some of these ideas.
That's cool. So he just submitted the 2 images.
Right now what we're doing at BART is we are contractors, so we planned out a mural, and with that mural we're going to put our ideas from the culture of Oakland, how we all perceive Oakland, instead of people that actually live here and not people outside it.
It's been fun working at BART. It's a different experience because I've never experienced working period, working with people to make a change. I've never done that before.
We love the idea of a mural, and we love the idea of having it completely from the point of view of young people, where they decided the theme, they picked the artist, they decide where it should go. This was something homegrown from the community, from our young writers.
We talked about technical things like sun exposure and how that will impact the longevity of the mural. We talked about how many people go in and out. And what was really resonating with the team was how much these students want this piece to last. They don't want it to be here and gone. They would love to see this be the first of many mural projects that express who they are as a community.
Those students, through Y Plan this year, felt a deeper connection with not just the city, but a belief that actually their ideas, their work does matter. And there is a place for them to be heard.
We make up Oakland because without us, everything is here is just land. Our ideas and stuff is what make Oakland, Oakland.
At the end of the day, the most important thing for everyone is to feel that they have a voice. Y Plan provides the opportunity in creating the change they want to see.
I miss these kids. It's been so weird being out of the place with these young people all year, but it's wonderful to have the video to be able to share with you, bring young people really into this work. I want to open it up for questions, but I want to say a lot of what now I'm typically asked, what happens, right? What happened to the work? What happened to the young people's ideas? And the next slide is to share some of those important outcomes. And for this project in particular, there were some really powerful outcomes the then general manager of BART stood up and said, I'm going to follow up on a lot of the range of issues that the young people addressed and the solutions that they came up with. The mural was one of them. I just want to also add that engaging young people is about changing place and changing policy. But I got to be honest, especially this year, something that has been so incredibly important when we think of ourselves as planners, and I'm a proud bureaucrat from New York City before I became an academic, it's about changing our minds and our hearts. It's an understanding that the engagement of young people isn't just a nice thing to have. It is a fundamental, necessary part of planning our cities and addressing the deep divisions and racial and economic inequalities that have become so incredibly prevalent in all of our cities, in all of our neighborhoods, in all of our suburbs today. So I just want to say, changing the minds and hearts is the biggest outcome that we can have when you engage in an experience like this. And there are also tangible changes that are really important. And so again, to the starting question of how can the Oakland Coliseum BART station be better connected to the local community, the starting out question, a number of things actually came from this work that were called for by the young people. Youth BART fare was extended to 12 to 18 years old. One of the reasons why the young men said, we don't use BART, they want to increase ridership, is because it's too darn expensive. So they were like, but there's a young person's fare. They're like, it's not us. In high school, we're 12 to 18. So they lowered the age to get a discounted fare. In addition, ticket machines that take small bills in Oakland, it's kind of crazy, but a lot of the machines only took bigger bills to give change. And the young people were like, we only have small bills, right? There were so many interesting reasons why young people with fare evasion or anything else that had nothing to do with actually not wanting to pay. As you heard in the video and you saw, a summer internship came. It's wonderful when it happens. It doesn't always happen, but increasingly, a lot of the clients recognize the need for young people to continue to play a role in this type of decision-making and thinking about policy. And they created paid summer internships. Literally at City Hall, when young people came, presented their recommendations, the general manager stood up and said, I want every manager to stand up. And then she said, I want each of you to come up with 2 internships and we'll pay for it for the coming year. So that was pretty powerful. Not always happening, but it's great when it does. And of course, the mural, I will tell you, and I was trying to find the pictures in the news of this, so I don't have it, but in August, during COVID, last August, 2 years after the final presentation and they hired an artist, it was finally finished. And with masks on in the middle of this pandemic, they had an unveiling of the mural that is now being seen more and more as we start engaging more and more in public transportation. And it's a beautiful mural called For the Culture, By the Culture. But for now, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. A couple of things. There's a policy brief on our website, which really gives you a quick overview of many of the 50 different projects that were there. We don't have a cover for our book yet, but in the fall, we will have a book. And we wanted the title to be Forging Justice and Generating Joy, Planning Cities For and With Young People. So it's coming out from Rutledge in the fall. They went with Planning Cities For and With Young People. I think we compromised on a colon of Forging Justice, Generating Joy, but that is really capturing a lot of what we do. And our website has videos. They have a DIY plan, so you can actually get a bit of the curriculum if you want to try it out. There's a database of over 250 different projects that you can search for: housing, transportation, elementary, high school, lots of different projects. But I think let me stop there and we can go to questions, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but we'll share the link to the website as well.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Deborah. I have one question, and then if other folks have anything, they can post it in the chat or Q&A, and I'll keep a lookout. But this question is from Jane. We do have a lot of government and public employees on the line today. So this question is oriented towards that. How can government include youth? It seems like it may be easier for academia to do this. Is there an example of a government, city, or state creating a youth engagement program that you'd look to for this?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I started this actually as a New York City Housing Authority. I was head of economic development at NYCHA in New York. So I'm a proud bureaucrat. And this started actually just working with young people in the South Bronx. So this absolutely is something done by many districts. Seattle has a really great youth and planning project that's gone on a number of years. Portland, not surprisingly, has a great youth and planning project. Vancouver. There are a number of projects where planning departments are directly engaging in that work. Higher ed can be a helpful tool, but it's not a necessary tool at all. In fact, the book is really trying to show how more and more people can do it, civic agencies can do it. And the tools on our website they're just for the public. In fact, one of the reasons why I wrote the book is a lot of folks were saying, why isn't higher ed involved in this? We work so hard to make the work accessible to cities and to districts that we de-emphasize the role of higher ed. So it's absolutely a tool. And there's a whole range of ways to do this. You don't have to do a full-on curriculum-based project at all. I could happy to talk more about some of those options, but.
So maybe really pertinent today, as you said, it's city planning graduation day, and you've been thinking, or been in that space today. And as a recent graduate of a city planning master's myself, connecting with schools, school districts, and youth was largely missing from my curriculum in grad school. And I kind of had to seek that information out on my own. And now that I'm a practicing planner, it is really difficult to connect with local schools, and districts can kind of be these monoliths. So what advice or tips would you give for planners out there or other public servants that would like to connect or engage more with their schools, and just important things to know about that dynamic and how to reach them authentically?
Yeah, there are two ways to go. Great question, and congratulations for joining our world. We need you. So, one is a kind of low hanging fruit. It's like everything else, is about relationships, right? A lot of people have relationships with a teacher or a district or someone in the education community, and it can really just start with learning what's happening in the school. And if you have so one can just be with relationships, right? If you have you want to go and you want to learn more of what's happening or engage around a certain question. A lot of what we find can be really helpful, though, is that school reform and what we're trying to do in high schools across the country is get more authentic learning. It's sometimes getting a bad rap, but Common Core is all about authentic learning. What we're trying to do in high schools across the country is more like what we do in college, which is kind of have a major, really help young people understand the reason why you're learning math, not just learning math, but how is math used in business or in planning or in healthcare. So there's a lot of applied learning that's no longer voc ed, the old world of, non-college bound vocational ed. We've really worked very hard. And that's where my background comes from, actually. I'm a PhD in education. And my frustration, and I'm a planner and I'm a community development professional for many years, but it was my frustration with the fact that we were trying to teach young people in isolation of the use of those, of the use of their work. And they get really turned off. And one of the great ways is project-based learning. So there is a lot more opportunity to actually help support schools trying to teach about different types of, do different projects. So short-term, often public guest speakers, opportunities for field trips, internships. Those are all kind of one-offs that schools are really, really wanting, particularly high schools. And then you could get involved in project-based learning opportunities after school or during school as well.
Awesome, thank you. We do have a couple of, oh, I'm sorry, I have another question now. I have a couple different platforms I'm fielding questions from. So this one is from Daniel. It says, how do you get a planning curriculum like those you mentioned introduced into a school? Find a teacher advocate, a school principal, superintendent, extracurricular club, just kind of start reaching out, start emailing?
Great question. Again, the world is going to, a lot of schools have been open. I don't know, in Tulsa, are schools open?
We are back to, I think, a hybrid model. We've kind of been oscillating in and out.
Yeah, we all are. I just don't want to take anything for granted. So there's like the world of COVID, and then I think we're moving back into, right? And technology actually can be very helpful in this work. So again, we have, the first way I would say is to really get on the website and look at what's happening in your local schools. A lot of times people and planners get frustrated because they're like, I have all these great opportunities and schools don't want to talk to me or they're too busy. And schedules are really important in schools. So I would talk to either a teacher or a principal and find out what are the goals of the school. I guarantee there's some type of internship or experiential learning happening. And then you find out what's happening there. And then how do you sort of fit into the school versus having something pre-prepared that has to be in a fixed way. So find out what's happening in the school and then share a real project that's happening. And again, it might be a one-day experience. Field trips are often great. Like BART, the first time was like, okay, yeah, come to BART one day. They were really uncomfortable around, they had a very funny relationship with young people for a lot of reasons that transit often gets in trouble with. And they were amazed how cool it was to bring young people to the BART station. In fact, that's what triggered a year-long partnership, was a one-day field trip to see the engineering. They got to see how BART was actually all designed, a group of 30 students. So if that's helpful. Start small. I do look at our website. Again, it's kind of good to get a sense of the range of different projects that are happening there, that are happening in the country, and start small and bring questions versus answers to schools.
So apart from youth engagement and engaging young people in the process of planning and including them, I know another big piece of UC Berkeley's Center for Cities and Schools is also doing research just on the impact of our school infrastructure in our cities, just what it looks like for so many people that visit a place every day, the impact that schools and their siting has on land use decisions and suburban sprawl and lots of other things concerning our built environment that schools directly play into. Can you speak a little bit about what it looks like to engage in those decision-making processes with decision makers in that space as planners, as we can be better tools or better collaborators for the entities within our districts that make decisions like that heavily influence our built environment, but maybe we're not as neatly collaborating as we could be?
Sure. I'll say two things. One, school facility, my colleague and co-founder of the center, Dr. Vincent, is right now one of the national leaders in school infrastructure and school research, particularly around reopening. So there are a lot of very important reports that he has put out that's on our website. You can just Google Center for Cities and Schools, and there's a number of them there, both at a state level and a national level with the new infrastructure bill. So I'd say go and look at some of those reports, because I think the truth is there just has not been enough understanding that school infrastructure, school buildings are a part of a city's infrastructure. And there's a huge reason for that. We've kept schools isolated and we don't teach schools in city planning, right? It's a big issue, even though they're often one of the largest land use actors, which is baffling, right? Because municipalities, for the most part, don't have control, right? Municipal control of many school districts, which are independently run by school boards. It's not a part of how we typically think about school infrastructure. So just changing that mind frame is really important. That's why the research that's on the website gave some data and evidence behind the importance of cities understanding school infrastructure as a part of how you need to navigate and create a healthy school and city. I would say one example that is often most accessible is around joint use of facilities, that as we're trying to get away from isolated school buildings in the outskirts of a city or the outskirts of a town that you have to drive to, as we're trying to integrate schools more within centers of community and centers of cities, joint use between libraries, joint use between health facilities, swimming pools. They're often a very important first step to really understanding the interrelationship and connection between built environment city and built environment school. It forges so many relationships, so many connections, and it's almost so intuitive. It's so easy. We don't do it enough. So joint use, and public health is also very involved in that because, of course, the increased access to amenities. Anything else you want to add about kind of what you see as helpful?
Helpful with engaging with school decisions?
Emily, that about, that we do a lot of housing work and the interrelationship between housing and schools. So a lot of housing, school segregation is coming from housing segregation. So there's a wide range of implications and unintended consequences by not connecting these fields.
Yeah, definitely. Just as a minor plug, for those of us that are planners out there that are members of APA, there is an interest group, the Public Schools Interest Group, which is a network of over 300 planners and also school planning and school district professionals that network on this very topic of trying to have planners connect more with teachers and districts and school decision makers, just in recognition of how many impacts it has. And some of the things that you just mentioned, Deborah, of how we're realizing the incredible impact of public health and what that looks like to engage our schools in that conversation, and then also housing and how that contributes to segregation concerns. I guess maybe this is a too personal question, but I don't see anything in Q&A or in chat, so I'm going to ask it because you have a housing authority background. But speaking to that intersection a little bit about how we can bridge our housing policy more closer to our schools, and in particular, housing stability, housing affordability. In Tulsa, we're nationally incredibly high. We're 10th or 11th on the list for evictions. So we do suffer from a lot of housing instability concerns, and a high number of homeless students here in our community. So what tips do you have for us kind of bridging the gap there between housing stability in our schools?
You know, it's a painful one part, because I would actually say my first point goes back to when I was in the New York City Housing Authority, and it hasn't changed that much. So 25 years later, information access is so critical. One of the things that was really painful in cities that are increasingly having more and more access to choice within school districts, I don't mean just charter school choice, I mean that you can, you know, understand the different options that are available, particularly in high school, but also in middle school, on some elementary, is that housing authorities can be great sources of information to get at families that don't typically see themselves as, you know, as constituents, as for public schools or, you know, school information. So information, and also about housing rights. A number of the Y Plan projects that have been done around housing, when young people look at how do we lower, you know, eviction, it's all about information. That there are so many laws out there that families just don't know about, right? That engaging young people made this so viscerally clear to not just authorities, but housing authorities, but, you know, to the city housing policymakers overall, is, but we have all these great eviction prevention programs, and you have this hotline, and the young people are like, but nobody knows about it. It's in, you know, it's in English. We speak 16 different languages in Oakland, right? So that type of sensitivity to local context and needs is really cost effective, right? So I think number one, information and engaging young people and understanding who and how to engage and share information that's out there is number one critical. Number two is also just understanding the lived experience of how young people and the informal things that are happening in our housing being doubled up. You know, we often say the quality of housing is such a relationship to how young people can succeed at school. But again, it's not how we think about housing policy, right? The noise in an apartment that has a number of people that's doubled up, and a lot of people, families, large families living together, can almost make it impossible for young people to do homework. That sounds like a funny thing, and how should housing be responsible for that? But this is actually really important, right? The quality of the housing really impacts schools. And also the needs for, you know, our changing populations, right? The size of families is something that young Y planners who are engaged in, or any conversation with young people will tell you about, you know, the local needs of really large families of newcomers, right? How they differ from the, you know, double income, no kids types of spaces. So even the design of units and affordable housing units need to be understood from the lived experience, the changing experience of young people, let alone, you know, resilience and how we have to adjust to fires and sea level rise and all the changing things because of climate change that young people are really aware of much more so. So I think this listening and understanding the physical infrastructure, design needs, the formal and informal uses and needs within housing, that policymakers, when we just look at our charts and our graphs and our data that we're more comfortable with, don't get a real sense of. Can I ask a question? You can just put this in chat, but how many folks here have actually engaged young people in in planning, whether it's a day for an engagement strategy or longer? And just, could you just put yes in, yes or no in chat? I'm just really curious. I wish I were all in an audience together. Oh, awesome. Okay, see, we've got a lot of experts on the line. Do we have a few more minutes? How much time do we have?
Yeah, we've got about 2-3 more minutes.
Okay, can we invite one of the folks that just said yes to share your experience, something different or akin to what we just talked about?
Definitely. So anyone who said yes, if you can raise your hand, I believe I can unmute you and you can share. Okay.
Brianne, I don't know. I'm dying to know how you worked kindergarten to high school. I'm like in my class calling out, but.
Yeah, so I worked with a youth leadership group. We had students basically fill out an application, and then they met 2 Wednesdays a month for a year and came up with projects that they wanted to do, all with the, it was when I was working in teen pregnancy prevention, so all with the hope of helping impact their school and empower the youth to, take charge. And they came up with some excellent ideas, and then they even wanted to have a conference at the end of the year to invite people. It was really great. We gave them a little bit of a budget, and basically they ran with it. And then it was kind of an unpaid position, but if they maintained a number of attendance throughout the year, then they were awarded a gift card.
Oh, it's terrific. Thank you. I love the different ways of rewarding young people. It doesn't have to just be money. If you work with schools, they often get extra credit, so it becomes academic. Anyway, that's great. Thank you. Do we have time for one more? I don't know if there's one more person. Got a lot of yeses.
There is a comment from Barbara in the Q&A. High school students are interested in engaging with professionals. There's a program, I think, in the suburbs of Dallas that's referenced, and professionals come into and talk to the students, and projects aren't not as specific to the district. It sounds like that's what you're mentioning, Barbara, that there is that interest there from high school students that do want to engage with professionals in the planning world.
Yeah, absolutely. The interest is there, and internships and even exposure types of opportunities to cities are so important for all of our young people who have probably never heard of planning, right? So I think it's also a great exposure to just who controls. It's like demystifying how our built environment, how our cities become what they are today. And yeah.
Okay, well, that does bring us right to about 2:45. It looks like we didn't get any more volunteers to raise their hand, but exciting that so many folks did chime in and say that they have worked in the field before, or have worked with youth in in planning projects. So thank you so much, Deborah, for joining us today and talking on this subject. Just enlightening to always think about this. I think it's a space in our planner minds we don't always go to. So it's great to also just hear really specific initiatives and ideas for how to engage youth more in our planning process. Because I made the plug earlier when we were sending out a bunch of the follow-up information, I'll also include the link to the public schools interest group for those of us that are APA members or planners in the audience. They're not an actual division, but they are trying to get there. And it's just a great network if this is something you're interested in professionally and would like to network with more school planners across the country.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.